I'd like some of those jobs. We do have a little bit of time for some questions. Are there questions anybody would like to ask any of the panelists here? Nobody wants a job.
Okay. You always have to call on people.
Yeah.
I know we were talking about this before, and Jennifer having brought it up. How important is continuing your education throughout your career, and where you want to get in your career path?
Yeah, just so we have it on record, how important is continuing education throughout your career?
So yesterday I just launched yesterday I just launched ACIL's new on-demand CLE platform. So you can now actually go onto our catalog and watch international CLEs and not have to take family law when actually what you care about is international law for CLE courses. I will say it depends on the field you're in. The private practice fields, they have wonderful course development inside. The big firms now make their own CLEs. They're all CLE accredited providers. They create their own content. I know Jones Day does, Arnold Porter, all the big places do. So they actually don't need it as much, although we do tend to provide unique perspectives, because what happens is it's all the internal folks at that law firm creating their own courses. The outside of that, it's a huge issue because the content is tough to come by on current events. So where I work, we actually will put together a CLE about South China Sea right as that's happening, about current issues as they're coming out, bringing in experts to talk about those fields. So it can be very helpful in just keeping up on the current issues.
I would say that it's indispensable, especially if you're interested in the area of international law, because international law changes every day depending on how international affairs impact it and how countries around the world are changing. So basically you're going to have to read at least on a weekly basis on what's happening and educate yourself, even if it's not related to a degree. In my case, it also related to a degree because I continued with my doctoral studies for another 4 or 5 years and managed to finish, early this year. But it was very important to understand, as I said when I was talking, the history of each and every country. And I'm not talking about the past history, mostly recent history. If you want to understand your interlocutor, and you will need it, if you're doing international work, you need to definitely educate yourself continually. But if you're doing it for a degree, you have to choose an area that you love, especially if you're doing a PhD or SJD as they call it here in Pittsburgh. You need to choose something that you love, because dealing with the same topic for 5 years, it can get boring sometimes. So choose something that is really interesting to you and really challenging, and something that has not been done before, I would say, so that you can give your contribution for the science as well.
And this is my 2 cents. This is something I think that is unique about choosing to go into an international practice of law, you're constantly dealing with new situations, new countries, new industries. I mean, my clients are mining, they're oil and gas, they're aviation, they're manufacturing or retail. You're constantly needing to learn new countries, new laws, and new industries. And the best piece of advice I can give you as you transition from a domestic lawyer to a global lawyer is this. As a domestic lawyer, you're hired by a client to provide you advice on what the law is. As global lawyers, what we really are is aggregators of the law. And then we have, and I think Max said this, we have to somehow aggregate that for a client, and that calls for constant education on your client's business, industry, and the various laws they're dealing with. You don't want to be hired and to advise on a transaction between a Canadian company in Africa with funding from Hong Kong, and then show up and say, yeah, my Asia guy says this, my Africa guy says this, U.S. law says this. I don't know. It's going to be a tough week for you. You're not going to be their lawyer for too long. So continuing education, and that doesn't necessarily come from formal programs, although it does. It comes from learning every day. And I think that's what I love about the global practice of law as opposed to domestic practice of law, is enables you to learn something new every day, and you have to.
And I'll add my 2 cents as well, drawing on what Vio said and what Lizzie said, or what Lizzie said earlier. Being a lifelong learner is essential. I mean, whether you're doing it formally or whether you're doing it informally. I mean, one of the worst things when you're interviewing someone or when you're evaluating someone who is in your organization, one of the worst things you can say about them is, you know, I just don't think they have a lot of intellectual curiosity. I just don't think they're all that interested. They're good technicians, but in order to go to the next level, you have to, and I think everybody has talked about the passion you have to have about what it is you do, and I think that's key. And I think a piece of that passion is simply having the drive to teach yourself something new every day. Sure.
I wanted to just say 2 things. In terms of, Lizzie and I have that in common, in terms of our U.S. government work, is we do have to become generalists. We don't get to specialize, really. In terms of your foreign assistance work and my work now, both at Commerce and at DOJ, one of the things I've done, the government's not very good about, the continuing legal education part. They just ask you, have you done your 2 hours every year or whatever the requirements are. So it's really up to me. While at Commerce, there were certain legal areas that I was particularly drawn to. The 2 that I can think of, I was really interested in countervailing duties. I thought that was really interesting. So I found a program on that. Investor-state arbitration, I had to do an entire program and work with the Ministry of Justice in Georgia on investor-state arbitration. Well, I felt like I needed to actually know what that was. So again, I was the one that found those opportunities, proposed them, and of course my counsels were more than happy to have me attend. That actually brings me to another point. I am subscribed to a whole lot of listservs. My email every morning is explosive with things from the Wilson Center, I have the State Department. Again, working for Commerce because I was focused on Eastern Europe, Eurasia, I was signed for anything and everything that had to do with Eastern Europe, Eurasia that was coming out of the State Department was in my inbox every morning. There's so many. I mean, I have like 50 I can think of right now. And I read everything. That took quite a bit of time, but you could come to me on any number of countries, on any day, and I could more or less tell you what was going on. I attended a lot of talks. I went to conferences. I did all this, and I did it while, having a very busy job, and previous job, one that required me to travel a lot. So again, none of those things were ever required. Those were all things that I came to do, but I think they make you much more well-informed. Yes, you're gonna have CLEs you're gonna be doing, but those are things you can be doing every day. Every morning, I would take that time to go through and read those headlines and read some of those stories. And I think all of us can suggest ways that you guys can be signing up for those things to find out about conferences and speakers. And again, networking. Meet people. You go to these things, introduce yourself to the speaker. It takes that one opportunity to meet that one person that's gonna lead you to the next opportunity in your life.
Other questions? Yes.
So everybody, as great alumni as well that are now looking at internships and jobs and stuff, what's one thing that whenever you are reading the same cover letter 100 times, it really pops out to you, just one thing that really makes that one person stood out based even though everybody else had the exact same experience.
The question is, what is the one thing in a cover letter or resume that really stands out if you're looking at a stack of applications for a position?
I'll start, although I'm sure everybody here. I'm going to say a couple of things that I cannot believe I'm actually going to say. Proofread, spelling mistakes, typos. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I cannot tell you, and unfortunately Pitt students as well are not perfect. It drives me crazy. The fact that I am receiving cover letters and resumes even. Cover letters, yes, you're writing them, you make a grammatical mistake here and there, but your resume, you're sending out to numerous parties. Every time you're sending it out with that typo. There's no excuse, and I'm pretty bad. I mean, I will tell people, I'm sorry, I can't live with the fact that you've made this many mistakes on your resume and your cover letter. And I still get cover letters that are obviously were not written for me. They were not written for the Commerce Department internship or the Department of Justice internship. I could tell obviously they were written and you literally changed my name and my department at the very first sentence. So I still get those. Those resumes are completely put aside immediately. What I read for, and it's what I mentioned, our experiences. I'm actually not a grades person. There are people at Justice, I'm having a hard time now because they look at grades, and that kind of frustrates me. Granted, I mean, if you're failing, I'm not talking about failing, but I really don't care if you got an A or a C. I care about what you did with your education. I care about what other extracurricular activities you've done. I care about that you've proven, what I mentioned basically, back to what I said earlier, is have you proven to me that you are genuinely interested and passionate about pursuing a career in international law? I'll say this. I meet with a lot of people that do just the internships at, or some are associate positions in clerking, and just that. They've done nothing else. Haven't even taken international legal classes that CILE organizes. When I ask them, they say, well, I'm taking classes to prepare me for passing the bar. Or I'm way too busy with the course load, I don't have time to do this. Or I don't have the money to go abroad and work abroad. Those are not excuses for me. We talked a lot about sacrifice. A lot of us up here on this panel have made a tremendous amount of sacrifice to get to where we are. I named a lot of things that I did while maintaining a full course load. I'm not any smarter or any better than anyone else in this room, but I worked hard and I was committed. So again, those are not going to be excuses for me to say, well, I couldn't make it work. I couldn't do it. You can do it. You can do a few things. So those are the kinds of things I look for. And again, unfortunately, the stack is still big. After you've weeded out all those people, it's still a big stack. And then a lot for me comes with the interview. So, bringing those people in, it's really about having good communication skills, being able to interview well. I urge you to take advantage of any kind of interview, kind of mock interviews, talk to Professor Brand, talk to other professors, talk to other people you interview with, talk to friends you have that are interviewing people. I do give a lot of advice on how to interview well because I've seen quite a bit of bad interviews. And someone I thought would be really good, they come in and they just blow the interview. Something with like not maintaining eye contact, not sending a thank you letter, although almost every single intern that interviewed with me from Pitt has sent me a thank you email or a thank you card. That's very important. I remember all of those things. So again, kind of little things. I'm sure it's nothing you haven't heard before, but believe it or not, all of us see it all the time.
So I'll actually mirror a lot of what Katerina said. I actually am harsher on resumes and cover letters. If I find a typo, it goes in the bin. I mean, I don't read any further. The first typo, I'm out. I've got a stack, and I need a way to narrow it down. So the first thing is a typo. For cover letters especially, two really important things. One, your resume is your checklist. That's what I'm looking at to see, do you meet those skills that I need? Do you meet those checkbox things that I need? I don't want sentences in your resume. I don't want, and this is a point of controversy, especially in DC, mission objectives or, statement of whatever. I want 5-word maximum in your resume. I want to be able to very quickly get a sense of what skills you're bringing, what work product you've done, what your experience is. I want to get that very quick. Your cover letter is a narrative. I shouldn't see a single bullet point. I still get cover letters that are like, 2 or 3 sentences and then bullet points. Look what I did. Look at what courses I took. That's even worse. Hooray, you took a course. I don't care. I want the answer to 2 questions in your cover letter. Why do you want this job? What is it about this job that makes you excited, that you are passionate about? It automatically resolves that whole I scratched out Department of Justice and wrote in Department of Commerce problem, which means you're going to have to spend time writing every cover letter. Every single one. It's going to take you a couple of hours to do. Prepare for that. And 2, the second question you should be answering is, why do they want you? Why should I, as an employer, want you? You have to work on the skill set of being able to sell yourself as a person, and that comes in 2 forms. One, you have to be confident and say, I actually can back up what I'm saying I can do here. I actually do have these skills. And 2, we talked a lot about all the domestic stuff that you can do that applies to international law. You should not rely on them figuring out that the domestic stuff that you've done applies to what you're talking about, or that your experiences apply to this. This is the point where you tell them, let me tell you why this internship that I did that seems completely unusual is actually entirely relevant to what you guys do. It demonstrates a couple of things. It demonstrates why your experience is important. It demonstrates that you've actually studied what this company, this organization, this government agency does, and you know what your skills are that are relevant. And it demonstrates that you actually understand their job description and you've picked up the jargon. You should be using the terms that they use in their job description in your cover letter and your resume. And I can go into far more detail on this if you want, but I talked.
Just a couple of quick things.
Yes. Let's get, yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, and then we'll
I
go.
owned a company, had 250 employees worldwide, hired a few attorneys, but I want you all to realize that your resume is, you are an attorney. It's your case for you. So not just your cover letter, but your resume, if you want that one job, your resume should be the case for you without even looking at the cover letter. Then the cover letter should only make very succinct discernments if something isn't clear in the resume. So I want to scare you all because your experiences that you are building should speak for themselves. And they already do. You are here. Be confident in that. You do not have to have a detailed cover letter. Your cover letter should only alleviate any confusion because someone isn't familiar with the program. That way you'll make less mistakes too.
Thank you.
A couple of points here. I work for a company that's about 150, almost 200 employees with a relatively low comparative turnover. It's only about $40 million a year, maybe just a little less than Alcoa. But we get, on average, about 15 resumes a day. We get a lot of CVs. Everybody gets a lot of CVs. Our recruiting director lost his mind a couple of months ago and started redlining resumes and sending them back to the people who had sent them to us. It was a bad day for him. But a couple of things. First of all, if you're going global, you're going to be applying across a lot of different industries, a lot of different formats. Apply for the right job. If you're going to apply, if you're trying to get a development job, if you're trying to get in with one of the Beltway bandits and you want to work for one of the contractors, you need to know the language. You need to know what this is about. You need to know what you're going to be doing as a development professional, because other people, namely the international relations people who come out of Johns Hopkins and Georgetown and GW, they've been instructed in how to apply to these jobs. They already know. So you need to find out how to apply to these jobs. The other bit is just a little practical bit of advice. A lot of the organizations that you will be applying to, again, if you're going global, have these new, unfortunately, these new web-based application processes. Use words that are in the job description. You will not get past door one unless you actually regurgitate what is in the job description. And it's just one of the weird little foibles of the internet-based job application system.
Now have to get past the algorithm before we get to the
Exactly,
person.
right.
And that's a new part of it all. We have reached the time to close this program. Before we go, though, I want to invite everybody to come back in this room at 1 o'clock. There's been talk about access to professors, getting to know professors, getting to know what they do. Sometimes we as professors don't talk much about the kinds of things that we're doing, not just teaching in a class, but doing other things. This is your chance for the students this afternoon to find out what your professors are doing. And they're doing cutting-edge stuff that's really important internationally, and they're going to talk about it this afternoon. Come and hear that. It gives you something to talk about with the professor, to make use of that access to the professor that you've been talking about. Come on up and join us at lunch. Come back down here at 1 o'clock. But first, join me in thanking our panelists for being here this morning and sharing their time with us.